Well, welcome to Coverings Connected, everybody. My name's Ryan Fazan. I'm here and I'm tickled to be here to talk to you guys on behalf of Tile of Spain for the Tile of Spain press conference here. So before we get started, let's just say hi to everybody. I'm sure that this is a different coverings for everyone. Be honest now, how many of you wave back at me even though your webcams are off? That's happened to me a couple of times. I just thought I'd pop in and say hello to everybody wherever you are. I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. I'm going to get out of the way now and get to the presentation. So I am, as I said, I'm honored to be speaking on behalf of one of the three majority owners of the show here, the Tile of Spain brand, which is on behalf of ASTER, the Ceramic Tile Association from Spain, the Manufacturers Association, as well as EFEX, the branch of the Spanish government responsible for foreign trade and the trade commissions all around the world. So I'm here to give you a bit of the Spanish perspective. And every year, there we go. Every year we go through a few different key points, and this year's no different, even though coverings looks a little different this year. I'm going to be going through the first third of the presentation is the first 4 points there before I get to the meat and potatoes that everyone knows me best for, which is trends. But first, I'm going to be looking at the Spanish perspective on some industry metrics, and I think I've got an original way to do that for you this year. Then we're going to get into a key initiative that Tile of Spain does every year, which is project case studies with the Tile of Spain Awards that were just done this February in Febisama. We're going to talk a little bit about the innovation engine that drives the think tank that drives the innovation from the Spanish manufacturers. And finally, we're going to get into our educational, marketing, and promotional activities that we do focused on the US market before we jump into trends. So let's move along and take a look at what our industry outlook is from the Spanish perspective in relation to the US market. Now, every year, I'm always looking at slides for this with a huge table that has all kinds of information on it, and generally it's tough to figure out what the important points are. So I've kind of pulled out the top level here and tried to give you the key sort of critical factors, and we're going to get into what they mean for us here in the US. It's really exciting to be able to tell you that Tile of Spain has grown to be 18.5% of the US market imports by value, which is the second highest, almost 1/5 of the market, and third highest by volume, almost 1/6 of the market at 16.9%. Now, these numbers are incredible given the bearish trend in the US market in terms of imports, down 7.4% by value and 5.2% by volume. What this means overall is that the US is a critical market for the Spanish manufacturing segment. Overall, it's the second top consumer of tile produced in Spain, outside of France being number one, and it's fastly growing on the heels. I'm expecting US to be number one in the next year or the following years. But what that means is that we've been building this exponential growth for years. Market share has almost doubled by value and more than doubled by volume since 2015 numbers. So that's huge. And it means big things in terms of where product development trends, promotion, and marketing are going. Anyone that went to Cersáy or Febisama this year will see that most of the novelty collections, everything new that everyone's looking for at those shows, is largely focused around US product trends, needs, and specifications. A lot of the promotional activities, the education that we're doing, the adoption and standardization processes that our manufacturers are going through as well are focused on North America's needs and codes as well. and the marketing that we're doing for these programs, the kind of scenes that we're building are largely North American design style, and focused on the trends in our built environment here in the US. Now, one thing that I did want to focus on a little bit is the Tile of Spain's awards program. It goes through 3 different categories: architecture, interior design, and graduate studies thesis projects. Now, we always talk about this every year at the press conference, but one of the most important things to understand is that it's less of a promotional gig and more an effort to inspire and educate design professionals here in the US about what is truly possible when you get into a collaborative process to develop solutions for your projects. So in the architecture category, I wanted to highlight the winner, the premier there on the left, which is a hospital developed in Barcelona by Peach Architects and 2BMFG. And what's interesting about this is ceramics truly are the central plot point of this entire building. They really define this building because of that brise soleil that wraps the entire facility. And when you're seeing this building from afar, it's a very simple read of terracotta, which matches all of the historic building stock around it. But as you get up close, you notice that those extruded ceramic louvers in the brise soleil are glazed on the underside, so that the building tells a different story to people depending on their relationship to it and where they are, how close they are. And those glazed louvers actually reflect the colors that are reflected off the Mediterranean. The honorable mention that I wanted to showcase here is the Tivoli building in Cartagena, because it really encapsulates the European design language of how they approach a refurbishment and addition project to a historic building stock. There is a disconnect between the design language. Now, they're complementary, but you can clearly tell where the old building stock stops and the addition begins. And it's something that's done so effectively in Europe that I think is something that we can learn from here in the US. And there is there's a lovely sort of wabi-sabi sort of disconnect between those 2 different styles. Now, both of those projects featured some fairly inexpensive ceramics. The 2 in the interior design category do as well. Both of these, both the winner and the honorable mention that I'm featuring here, are one single piece of ceramic. In the case of the bus station, which won the award this year, it's an extruded ceramic. You can see it in cross section there on the top. So it's got those hollow louvers to create that sort of corrugated surface. It almost looks like corrugated metal, but it's got the high performance of ceramics in this beautiful, wonderful, easy to clean, high gloss white ceramic finish for that public space. And the camper store is this extruded fish scale that doubles as the iconic view of the space, both in profile and then installed in the cash windows there as well. And it also functions as a merchandising platform. So what I wanted you to take away from these Tile of Spain awards, and the true point of them, is showcasing what's possible when design professionals collaborate and say that they need a solution for a building that they're creating. Ceramics have the potential to be the defining characteristic of a building in a world-class city, and they don't have to be the most expensive thing in it. The kind of solutions that are created here are very simple technology that we've had for centuries that create world-class solutions. So now I want to get into one of my favorite aspects of Tile of Spain, which is the innovation engine. And it's this organization called ITC, the Institute of Technology and Ceramics. And what it is about exploring opportunities. They've got these deep connections with chairs in universities around the world, obviously across Spain, including Polytechnic Valencia, where they have one of the premier graduate studies ceramics engineering programs, as well as here in the US at Harvard's GSD, as well as Germany and England and other chairs around the world. But what this does is afford funded research opportunities to drive our sector further into the future. Now, it's a multifaceted organization. They've got different observatories for ceramics specifically, for the market in general, for technology, as well as for trends and habitat, which puts out a fantastic trends article every single year. So I wanted to just tell you about a couple of the things that are ongoing right now. There's the CareLam project that's looking at new cold adhesion techniques to laminate different surfaces of ceramic lamina together to create a more technical material without adding cost and environmental burden by increasing the carbon footprint by firing it multiple times. There's the Sil Life and Sil Coat project that's looking at the harmful characteristics of silicates and how they develop in silicosis for workers in both the factory as well as installation professionals. They're developing treatments that are reducing the harmful characteristics of silicates by up to about 80%. Then there's the Cero project that's looking at the future of ceramics and developing better environmental stewardship for our manufacturing with energy optimization in this extended plan out to 2050. Already they're reducing the temperature required to fire a lot of ceramics by 200 degrees Celsius or more, as well as the Hypobrick project that's looking at diverting waste stream from ceramics to create a non-fired structural brick material to be utilized in building stock. So the last one I wanted to feature, because it is relevant here in the US, we do get hurricanes and floods and things like that. And there's also local manufacturing in the US. So this Life CERSUDS, which is Ceramic Sustainable Drainage System, it's an acronym for that, is taking waste material from factory seconds, thirds, and fourths that aren't commercially viable, cutting them into small strips and then laminating them together into a permeable paving material so that the entire paving of a public space can operate as drainage that can also harness the water for irrigation of the parks that the paving is surrounding. So there's all sorts of different opportunities that are created by ITC in making ceramics make a better built environment and world around us. So finally, I just want to talk about a few things, because a few promotional and educational things that we do, because all of the innovation in our industry is for naught if we're not getting the word out there. And education has been something that's been top of mind for Tile of Spain for decades. And obviously, I mean, you can see from the pictures here, I've been a part of it. There's the Facebook Live and YouTube channels where we've got manufacturer interviews, we've got educational videos, and videos from our trade show experiences, which leads into our Passport to Creativity, where we bring editors and design professionals to Spain and show them all about ceramic manufacturing, the way ceramics are incorporated into architecture. We do on-site seminars. Obviously, those are crippled right now. We're doing as many digitally as we can, as well as online CEUs. And all of this can be found at tileofspain.com. It's a great resource. We have a full CEU repository, as well as the quick ship catalog that showcases all the novelties that are available here in the US for project specifications. And that gets me through the first third, and now we're going to get into product trends. And what I want to talk to you today is, I don't have as much time as I would like, so I'm going to talk to the macro trends. And when I'm looking at macro trends, I start looking at every other category possible that isn't related to interiors or ceramics: movies, podcasts, books, vacation locales. What kind of things are we exposed to every single day that starts building our preferences, that starts building the trends and things that we're connecting with? And that starts to tell us the overall macro view of what's going to be relevant for ceramics. And I've come up with 5 macro trends that I think are really sort of core and central, and going to be ubiquitous this year and moving forward in all products in the ceramic world. So first of all, we've got this sort of overarching universal trend, that this maximalism that we saw in response to the minimalist trend for years is kind of evolving to a more deeply connected theme of abstract expressionism. I'm going to talk about 2 different decades that are both characterized by what came before them, which is the sort of mashup of the 20s and 50s, both of them being characterized by the world wars that they followed. Then we're going to get into chalking it up to progress, which is the emergence of hyper matte and flat colors. Don't worry if you're confused, we'll get into it. Finally, we're talking about the personal characterization of what constitutes a viable luxury product today, and then our reconnection with the earth with terra firma. So number 1, I wanted to talk about this evolution that I'm seeing from maximalism. I always kind of hated that maximalism that was so strong last year was really only defined by its being the antithesis of minimalism. Now, it's true we needed a palate cleanser because we really had about a decade of minimalism that we were embracing deeper and deeper up until last year. And maximalism came on the scene where it was just throwing all sorts of different things into a space. And there's ways to do it well, but there's also ways to do it very, very poorly. What I love about how it's evolved and how I think it translates to a more abstract expressionism style is that now all of the different things that we're building into our spaces need to have some sort of story. They have to have a connection. They have to have something that resonates with both the owners of the space and the people that are using it. And I'm seeing that done so wonderfully in tile today. Everything has this deep story, and it's so easy to do in tile because tile has literally centuries of history to draw upon. Now, one of the things I love about abstract expressionism, things like the action painters like Jackson Pollock and all the other amazing artists that came out of New York during the 50s and the rise of abstract expressionism, is that the canvas is almost as great a protagonist as whatever their medium they're putting on it. And I see that to be the case so much in the novelties this year, where our canvas programs, our sort of backdrop programs are so nuanced. They're as deep and engaging and interesting as the eye candy that we're putting around them. So I loved that. And that just spoke and underlined that sort of transition to abstract expressionism from the sort of throw everything, including the kitchen sink, at it, that I kind of see as a maximalism style. Now, I want to talk about period-specific references. And looking at forecasts, I'm sure everyone noticed that there was a lot of people sort of positing that we were going to have a complete literal rehash of the Roaring 20s because it happened to be another 20s decade. And while it's true, there is a lot of 1920s inspiration that's coming into design in a very, very effective way. I'm also seeing a revival of 1950s, again, with abstract expressionism, with some mid-century modern pieces that are coming in, as well as a lot of the patterns and colorways. And the interesting thing when you look at these 2 decades is they're very characterized by the crises that came before. And I think that despite us being in the middle of our own crisis at the moment, I think that the 2020s are also characterized by a bunch of crises that we've weathered getting up to here. So it's really interesting when you see these 2 decades of design language mashed together, because they're actually more complementary than you would expect that they would be at first glance. And you're seeing that in the marketing images and in the tile programs and the direction of them in general. Like this one here, where we've got the very classic Art Deco style of the texture and the relief of that white marble, but it's paired with some mid-century modern pieces on that credenza that is also very 50s style, as well as the art and color palette throughout the space as well. So we're seeing this mashup of these 2 decades that have this design language of infinite geometry, repeating patterns, and they marry so well together in theme, in concept, in color palette, and we're seeing that transpose across all sorts of different tile programs today, both the 20s and 50s coming together to create this, this lovely new look. So the third one I want to talk about, I call Chalk It Up to Progress. And anyone that's been on any kind of designer DIY site or looked at any of the HGTV shows and things like that, we see this huge appreciation growing for craftsman pieces of furniture, cabinetry, frames for our artwork. Anything that was done decades ago when people took the time to do it by hand and do it properly. This revival of craftsman furniture and the need to modernize it in some way and update it and restore it led to the advent of this gradient or ombre hued chalk paint that was being done to a bunch of these vintage pieces. And I'm seeing this hyper matte and flat tonality come into ceramic programs in an extremely effective way this year. You know, all sorts of different styles, from marbles to solid colors to terracottas to tesserae and things like that. And the most important thing about this trend is twofold. It's hyper matte. So it's this flat tone, and the only way to get there in terms of the overall perception of the aesthetics is to get to a very narrow band of color and just spread the variation in saturation rather than moving from hue to hue to get our variation. So this flat tone also lets us, and the hyper matte lets us highlight and showcase the changes with finish from hyper matte to super gloss, where we can take digitally applied veins in metallics and gloss in our marbles and leverage the new technology that we have to really showcase it in an extreme way that makes a huge impact, bigger than the details. So the second to last one I want to get into is that the feeling that luxury, if something's going to be luxury, if something's going to be over the top today, it really has to be deeply personal. And I've had quotes throughout all of these. I hope you've noticed them. And I know that I'm going through fairly quickly. This presentation will be available later so that you can grab everything from it. But this quote in particular from Coco Chanel, I thought was, she's the madam of luxury. And I thought it perfectly exemplified what we're doing with our luxury programs today, that luxury is not the opposite of poverty, it's the opposite of vulgarity. So we're taking these deeply impactful stories, these iconic stones that are aggressive and haven't had a place to tell their story, because our design language was so minimalistic that you know, there's quarries that are opening up that have been closed for decades, and we're photographing them and reproducing these beautifully aggressive stones digitally to create this deeply personal experience of luxury, as well as it doesn't have to be over the top. It can be extremely refined, and just by looking at these little subtle brass inlays and the composition between the field of that floor and the acacia wood inlay, you can tell that this is a luxury program, that someone took so much time and thought to build in those refined little details, that the fact that it is truly impeccable is what makes it luxury, and it tells a story. It builds on the design language of a space that builds into that abstract expressionism and every other theme that's come before. So finally, I want to talk about terra firma. Obviously, the situation we find ourselves in today is telling us that we're deeply connected in a symbiotic relationship to our world. A lot of things have been telling us that more and more. And so the honoring of natural materials, noble natural materials, is something that's very, very strong in our design language today. And there's nothing more natural when you get down to it than baked dirt, which is ceramics. And ceramics have this wonderful history, whether it's glazed or unglazed, that they can draw upon, that tells this deep connected story. And I love that I'm seeing so many programs that are coming out today that aren't ceramics being a chameleon, that aren't ceramics trying to be something else, that are taking a modern representation of decades, if not centuries, of practice and building new programs that are strictly ceramics, that you look at them and you know that it can be nothing other than ceramics. It has that connection to our world, to our earth that we depend on, that is a noble material, and truly tells a deep and impactful story. So I hope you've enjoyed our take on the industry today. I know that the chat was turned off. If you have any questions, there's an email there, kdoyle@frankadvertising.com, that you can send any questions to. The presentation and links will be on tilespaneusa.com, as well as future presentations that we're doing. I'm going to be delving deeper into trends, and I've got a few others in the the Coverings Connected conference as well. So I want to thank you all deeply for joining us today. I wish I could be there in New Orleans with you, but I hope that, and I know that the Coverings team has been working so hard to bring you your normal coverings as much as we can. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.